My daughter told everyone at her wedding that I was dead. I was sitting in the back row, listening to her describe how hard it was growing up without a father, how she wished I could have walked her down the aisle, how brave she'd been after losing me. I'd raised her alone for 20 years. I was at every recital, every game, every birthday. I worked 2 jobs to pay for her college, and she killed me off because I was a high school teacher, too poor, too ordinary for her new rich in-laws to accept. But 30 minutes into the reception, a wedding video started playing. Nobody knew what was coming, not even me. This is the story of how the truth crashed my daughter's wedding, the wedding where I was supposed to be dead. I just wanted to walk my little girl down the aisle. Instead, I became the ghost she wished I was. Before we continue, please subscribe the channel and comment down your thoughts on the video. The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks before I finally opened it. Not because I didn't care. God knows I cared too much, but because I knew what it meant. Sarah, my only daughter, was getting married, and I had to face the reality that I might not be welcome at my own daughter's wedding. The elegant cream envelope felt heavy in my hands, heavier than paper should ever feel. When I finally slid my finger under the seal, my hands trembled slightly. Inside, the invitation was beautiful. Gold lettering, expensive cardstock, everything a father would want for his daughter's special day. But it was what was written on the back, in Sarah's own handwriting, that made my chest tighten. Dad, I'm only inviting you because Mom insists. Please don't make a scene. Just come, sit in the back, and leave after the ceremony. My in-laws don't need to know about our issues. Our issues. That's what she called it now. As if the years of lies she'd been telling about me were just minor disagreements we'd had over curfews or homework. I set the invitation down and walked to my study, where I kept all the memories she'd apparently forgotten. Photo albums from when she was little, every report card she'd ever gotten, the Father's Day card she'd made me in elementary school with crayon hearts and misspelled words of love. How did we get here? How did I become the villain in my own daughter's story? It started 5 years ago, when Sarah met Marcus. He came from what people call good stock. His father was a federal judge, his mother a successful real estate developer. They had the kind of money that came with expectations, with standards, with judgments about people like me. I was just a high school history teacher who'd raised my daughter alone after her mother, Linda, left us when Sarah was 7. We'd done okay, Sarah and I. At least, I thought we had. But when Marcus's family entered the picture, suddenly okay wasn't good enough. Sarah started seeing our modest 2-bedroom house through their eyes. The car I'd driven for 15 years became an embarrassment. The camping trips we used to take instead of flying to Europe were rewritten as deprivation rather than adventure. The first time I met Marcus's parents, Richard and Margaret Hamilton, was at an upscale restaurant downtown. I'd worn my best suit, the one I bought for parent-teacher conferences, but I could see Margaret's eyes assess and dismiss it within seconds. Richard shook my hand with that firm grip successful men perfect, the one that says, "I'm better than you, and we both know it." "So, Tom," Richard had said, already getting my name wrong, "it's Tim. Sarah tells us you're in education." The way he said education made it sound like I cleaned toilets for a living. Not that there's anything wrong with that either, but his tone carried a special kind of condescension reserved for people he considered beneath him. "I teach history at Lincoln High," I'd answered, trying to keep pride in my voice.
23 years of shaping young minds, of making history come alive for teenagers who thought the past was boring. I was good at my job. My students loved me. But in Richard's eyes, I saw only calculation. How much could a teacher possibly make? How much could he have saved for Sarah's future? "How interesting," Margaret had murmured, which translated to, "How unfortunate." Sarah sat beside Marcus, her hand in his, and I watched her watching them. She was seeing me through their eyes, and I was coming up short. That was the night everything started to change. The lies began small. Sarah told them her mother had died rather than abandoned us. It was easier, she said, than explaining that Linda had chosen her new boyfriend over her 7-year-old daughter. Then the lies grew. Suddenly, I had a gambling problem that explained why we'd never had much money. Never mind that I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat after Linda left, tutoring in the evenings and teaching summer school so Sarah could have dance lessons and soccer camps. The fictional version of me that Sarah created for the Hamiltons was a man who'd squandered opportunities, who'd held her back, who'd been more burdened than father. Each family dinner with them added another layer to this false narrative. I only learned about it secondhand, through Sarah's cousin Emma, who'd overheard Sarah at a family gathering. She told them you used to forget to pick her up from school, that you'd be at the bar and she'd have to walk home alone. I never had more than a beer or 2 in my entire life. I never once forgotten to pick up Sarah. I'd been parent room, PTA president, the dad who never missed a recital or a game. But in Sarah's new narrative, I was neglectful, irresponsible, barely functional. Standing in my study now, looking at the invitation, I wondered if I should even go. What was the point of attending a wedding where I'd be hidden in the back like a shameful secret? But then I looked at a photo from Sarah's 5th birthday, her face covered in chocolate cake, laughing as I carried her on my shoulders. That little girl was still in there somewhere, beneath the lies and the pretense. I had to go. Not for the woman she'd become, but for the daughter she used to be.
The morning of the wedding arrived with unusual April warmth, the kind that makes you think about new beginnings and fresh starts. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the tie Sarah had given me for Father's Day 10 years ago. She'd been 16 then, working her first job at the mall, and she'd spent half her paycheck on this silk tie because she'd said I deserved something nice. Now I wondered if she even remembered giving it to me. My neighbor, Carl, had offered to drive me to the venue. He knew the situation. Not all of it, but enough. "You sure you want to do this to yourself, Tim?" he'd ask when I told him about the invitation. But I had to go. Missing Sarah's wedding would give her more ammunition, more stories to tell about the father who couldn't even show up for her big day. The Hamiltons had rented out the entire Rosewood Country Club, a place where membership cost more than my annual salary. As we pulled up to the valet station, I saw the other guests arriving. Couples in designer clothes stepping out of luxury cars, everyone looking like they belonged in a magazine spread. I climbed out of Carl's 10-year-old Honda and tried not to feel like an imposter. Inside the venue was transformed into what looked like a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers brought in specially for the occasion, gold chairs with silk cushions. Linda was already there, standing near the entrance with her husband, Robert. She'd remarried well. Robert was a pharmaceutical executive, and she wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Tim," she said, her voice carrying that false warmth she'd perfected over the years, "I'm glad you came." "She's my daughter," I replied simply. Linda's expression shifted slightly, something like guilt flickering across her features before she composed herself. "The Hamiltons have really outdone themselves," she said, changing the subject. "Margaret planned everything herself." Of course she did. Margaret Hamilton wouldn't trust anyone else with something this important, this visible, this much of a statement about their family status.
I found my assigned seat, back row, corner, partially hidden behind a large floral arrangement. The place card simply said Tim, not father of the bride, not even my last name. I was being erased in real time, edited out of my own daughter's story like an unwanted character in a novel. As the guests filed in, I recognized some faces from Sarah's childhood. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been her third-grade teacher, sat several rows ahead. She'd once told me Sarah was lucky to have such a devoted father. Dr. Brennan, who'd treated Sarah's broken arm when she fell off her bike at age 9, was there with his wife. I'd held Sarah's hand through the entire emergency room visit, singing silly songs to distract her from the pain. Did any of them know the version of me Sarah had been selling to the Hamiltons? Marcus's family filled the first 3 rows on the groom's side. Richard stood near the altar, checking his phone even now, probably closing some deal or moving money around. Margaret fluttered between guests like a social butterfly, her laugh tinkling across the space. Marcus's siblings, a brother and 2 sisters, all looked like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren ad. Then the music changed, and everyone stood. The bridesmaids came first, friends Sarah had made in college and after, during her new life. I didn't recognize any of them. Then came Linda, escorted by Robert, taking her place in the front row, the mother of the bride, playing the role she'd abandoned 20 years ago. And then Sarah appeared. She was breathtaking. The dress was everything she'd dreamed of when she was little, playing wedding with her dolls. Her hair was swept up, revealing the neck that used to be ticklish when she was small. She held on to Robert's brother's arm, not mine, not her father's, but a stranger's, and began her walk down the aisle. As she passed my row, our eyes met for just a moment. I saw something flicker there, recognition, maybe regret, possibly just annoyance that I'd actually shown up. Then she looked away, focusing on Marcus at the altar, on her future, on the life she was building on a foundation of lies about her past. The ceremony was beautiful and hollow. The officiant spoke about love and trust, about building a life together on honesty and mutual respect. I wondered if Sarah felt the irony. When he asked if anyone objected, I stayed silent, though my heart screamed. What would be the point? I was just the embarrassment in the back row, the father she wished she could rewrite out of existence. During the vows, Sarah promised to love Marcus with her whole heart, to be truthful and faithful, to honor their union above all else. Marcus looked at her like she hung the moon, this boy who had no idea he was marrying someone who could so easily rewrite history when it didn't suit her narrative. After the kiss, after the pronouncement, after the recessional, I stood to leave as instructed. But Margaret Hamilton appeared at my elbow. Her smile sharp as winter ice. "You must be Tim," she said, though we'd met before. "How nice that you could make it. Sarah wasn't sure you would." "I wouldn't miss my daughter's wedding," I said carefully. "No, I suppose not," Margaret replied, her tone suggesting she wished I had, "though from what Sarah's told us, you've missed quite a lot else in her life."
I should have left then. Sarah had asked me to leave after the ceremony, and I'd seen her get married. That should have been enough. But as I stood in the parking lot, watching other guests move toward the reception hall, something held me back. Maybe it was Carl's voice in my head saying, "You deserve to be there, Tim. You raised that girl." Or maybe it was just stubborn pride. Either way, I found myself following the crowd to the reception. The Hamilton family had transformed the country club's grand ballroom into something out of a dream. Twinkling lights created a canopy overhead, and each table was a work of art, with towering centerpieces of white orchids and roses. A string quartet played softly as guests found their seats. I noticed there was no place card for me at any table. My invitation truly had ended at the ceremony. I stood near the back wall, trying to be invisible, when Emma found me. Sarah's cousin had always been kind to me, even after the family dynamic shifted. "Uncle Tim," she said, using the title she'd given me since childhood, though we weren't blood related. "I saved you a seat at our table. Come on." "Emma, I shouldn't." "Nonsense. You're family. You belong here." Her table was off to the side, filled with distant relatives and plus ones who didn't quite fit the Hamiltons' curated guest list. But it was better than standing alone, better than leaving with my tail between my legs. As the evening progressed, I watched Sarah work the room with Marcus, playing the part of the perfect bride. She laughed at Richard's jokes, complimented Margaret's planning, charmed every Hamilton relative and business associate. This was who she was now, or who she was pretending to be. The speeches began after dinner. Marcus's brother talked about growing up together, about family traditions and expectations. Margaret gave a speech about gaining a daughter, though her words felt more like she was acquiring an asset. Richard spoke about success and breeding, about the importance of choosing the right partner from the right background. Then Linda stood up. "I want to thank the Hamiltons for welcoming my daughter into their family," she began, raising her champagne glass. "Sarah has overcome so much to get here today. Being raised by a single parent isn't easy, and there were many challenges along the way." My blood ran cold. She was really going to do this. Linda was going to stand there and take credit for raising Sarah, erasing not just my presence, but my entire contribution to our daughter's life. "But we persevered," Linda continued. "I made sure Sarah had everything she needed, even when times were tough." Emma grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing it hard. She knew the truth. She'd been there for many of those years, had seen me at every school event, every birthday party, every soccer game, while Linda was building her new life 3 states away. "To Sarah and Marcus, may your marriage be filled with honesty and joy." Honesty. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. That's when the videos started playing. Marcus had mentioned earlier that his college roommate, David, had put together a surprise video for the reception, a compilation of moments from Sarah's life leading up to this day. The lights dimmed, and the screen at the front of the room illuminated. At first, it was recent footage, Sarah and Marcus on vacations, at parties, with friends. Then it moved backward through time, showing Sarah in college, in high school. David had been thorough, reaching out to old friends for photos and videos. Too thorough, as it turned out. Because suddenly, there I was. Video after video, photo after photo. Me teaching Sarah to ride a bike in our driveway, her face scrunched in concentration. Me at her kindergarten graduation, tears streaming down my face as she sang Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star off key. Birthday parties where I was the one lighting candles, serving cake, playing games with a dozen screaming kids. Halloween costumes I'd sewn myself because Sarah wanted to be something specific that wasn't sold in stores. Science fair projects we'd worked on together at the kitchen table until midnight. The Wranglers herd where Sarah had wanted to be Uncle Dave because I was her wrangler. The room grew quiet as the timeline continued backward. There was footage from Sarah's Sweet 16, the party I'd saved for all year, held in our backyard with handmade decorations because we couldn't afford a venue. I watched my younger self on the screen, dancing with my daughter to her favorite song, both of us laughing. She looked at me in that video with such love, such pure adoration. "Turn it off," I heard Sarah whisper from the head table. But David wasn't near the controls, and whoever was running the projection booth didn't hear her. More images flashed by, me at every piano recital, even the one where Sarah forgot her piece halfway through, and I mouthed the notes from the audience until she remembered. Soccer tournaments where I was coach, referee, and biggest cheerleader. The father-daughter dance at her middle school where she'd been so proud to show me off to her friends. Then came the video that changed everything. Sarah's friend Katie had recorded it at what we'd called Sunday sessions, weekly gatherings at our house where Sarah's friends would come over to study and I'd make huge batches of pasta and help them with their homework. In the video, teenage Sarah was talking to the camera. "My dad is literally the best. Like, he works all day teaching, then comes home and helps us with our essays, makes us dinner, and never complains. My mom left when I was little, and my dad did everything alone. He's Superman. I don't know what I'd do without him."
The video continued, but the ballroom had gone completely silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes moving between the screen and the head table, where Sarah sat frozen, her face draining of color. Marcus looked confused, glancing between his bride and his parents. Richard Hamilton's expression was unreadable, but Margaret's mouth had formed a tight line. On screen, more moments played out. A video from Sarah's high school graduation where she gave a speech thanking me for being both mother and father, for never missing a single event, for working 2 jobs to pay for her college applications. Photos from the summer we spent driving across the country to visit colleges, just the 2 of us, singing along to her playlist and staying in cheap motels. We'd eaten so much fast food on that trip that we'd sworn off French fries for a month afterward. "This is beautiful," Emma whispered beside me, wiping tears from her eyes. "David found all of this?" But I wasn't watching the screen anymore. I was watching Sarah. She had pushed back from the table slightly, her hands gripping the edge of the tablecloth. Marcus was leaning toward her, whispering something, but she wasn't responding. Linda, at the adjacent table, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The video reached what should have been its climax, a montage of father-daughter moments set to "I Hope You Dance," the song I used to sing to Sarah when she was scared of thunderstorms. But just as it started, the screen went black. Someone had finally found the off switch. The lights came back up slowly, revealing a room full of confused faces. Richard Hamilton stood up, clearing his throat with authority. "Technical difficulties," he announced with forced joviality. "These things happen. Let's move on to the cake cutting, shall we?" But the damage was done. The cognitive dissonance was too great. The devoted father in those videos couldn't be reconciled with the negligent, problematic man Sarah had described to the Hamiltons. People were whispering, looking at me with new recognition, then at Sarah with questions in their eyes. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air," she announced to no one in particular, and fled toward the balcony doors. Marcus started to follow, but she held up a hand to stop him. I sat there for a moment, feeling Emma's hand still on mine, watching the aftermath unfold. Margaret was damage controlling, moving between tables with explanations I couldn't hear. Richard had cornered the AV technician, probably demanding to know how this had happened. Linda had disappeared entirely. "Go talk to her," Emma said quietly. "She needs to hear from you." "She doesn't want to hear from me," I replied. "She made that clear." That was before everyone saw the truth. "Go, Uncle Tim. If not now, when?" I found Sarah on the balcony, still in her wedding dress, staring out at the golf course. The sunset painted everything golden, making her look like the little girl who used to wait for me by the window when I came home from work. "You weren't supposed to stay for the reception," she said without turning around. "I know. I specifically asked you not to." "I know that too."
We stood in silence for a moment. I could hear the reception continuing inside, the band starting up, life moving on despite the earthquake that had just shaken the foundation of Sarah's carefully constructed narrative. "They're going to have questions," she finally said. "Marcus's parents, they're going to want to know why I lied." "Why did you lie, Sarah?" She turned to face me then, and I saw tears had carved tracks through her perfect makeup. "Because it was easier, because they already thought I wasn't good enough for their son, because a father who chose to leave sounded better than a mother who abandoned us, because a negligent father explained why we didn't have money better than the truth that you gave everything you had to make sure I had what I needed. But those aren't reasons, sweetheart. Those are excuses." "I know." The words came out almost as a wail. "I know, okay? But once I started, I couldn't stop. Each lie required another one to support it. And then suddenly I had created this whole alternate history where you were the villain and the mother was the hero. And the Hamiltons ate it up because it fit their worldview of people like us." "People like us?" "People who aren't them, Dad. People who work for a living instead of living off investments. People who shop at Target instead of Nordstrom. People who drive cars until they fall apart instead of trading them in every 2 years." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what Margaret said when she found out you were a teacher? She said, 'Well, that explains a lot.' And you let her think the worst of me." "I let her think what she wanted to think. It was easier to defend you, easier to explain that everything good in me came from you, not from the mother who showed up again when I was successful enough to be worth knowing." A sob escaped her then, and instinctively I stepped forward, but she held up a hand, stopping me, just like she'd stopped Marcus. "The worst part," she continued, "is that I started to believe it myself. I rewrote our history so many times for them that the lies became more real than the truth. I actually started to resent you for things that never happened, to blame you for problems you didn't cause."
The balcony door opened behind us, and Marcus appeared, looking between his bride and me with confusion and something else. Suspicion, maybe, or the first dawning of understanding. "Sarah, my parents are asking questions," he said carefully. "They want to know about the video, about him." He gestured to me like I was a problem to be solved. "About my father," Sarah said, and there was an edge to her voice I recognized, the same tone she'd used as a teenager when she was about to stand her ground on something. "About the discrepancies," Marcus replied, choosing his words carefully, "between what you've told us and what we just saw." "You mean the lies?" I said quietly. Both of them turned to look at me. "Call them what they are. Sarah told you lies about me, and now you've seen the truth." Marcus's face flushed. "I don't think you should, what, speak? Defend myself? I've been silent for 5 years while my daughter painted me as a deadbeat to impress your family. I think I've earned the right to a few words." "Dad, please," Sarah started, but I wasn't finished. "Do you know what your wife told your parents about me, Marcus? Did she tell you the same stories? That I had a gambling problem? That I was neglectful? That I chose alcohol over her?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. "I worked 2 jobs for 11 years. I was at every school event, every game, every recital. I learned to braid hair from YouTube videos and to sew from library books because Sarah needed costumes for plays. I haven't had more than a beer since Linda left because I promised myself I'd never give Sarah a reason to doubt that she was my priority. Everything I did, every sacrifice I made was for her." "Then why would she—" Marcus began, but Sarah cut him off. "Because I'm a coward," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "Because your family made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough. And I thought if my story was tragic enough, if I had overcome enough, maybe they'd accept me. A girl raised by a single mother who persevered despite a deadbeat dad? That's a narrative they could respect.
A girl raised by a schoolteacher father who did his best but couldn't provide the life they thought I deserved? That just confirmed their prejudices. Marcus stared at his new wife like he was seeing her for the first time. "You lied to me, to my family, for 5 years?" "I lied to them about everything," Sarah exploded. "I lie about growing up poor, about shopping at thrift stores, about not traveling abroad because we couldn't afford it. I lie about my mom because the truth, that she left us for another man and only came back when I got engaged to you, doesn't fit the image. I've been lying since the day I met you because I knew the truth would never be enough." The door opened again, and this time Richard and Margaret Hamilton stepped onto the balcony, their faces set in identical expressions of controlled displeasure. "We need to discuss this situation," Richard said, his judge's voice leaving no room for argument. His eyes fixed on me with cold assessment. "You're Tim, I presume, Sarah's father." "I am." "The videos we just saw paint a rather different picture than what we've been led to believe," Margaret added, her tone suggesting this was somehow my fault. "The videos showed the truth," I said simply. "I raised Sarah alone from the time she was 7. I was there for everything, provided everything I could, loved her unconditionally. The only crime I'm guilty of is not being wealthy enough for your standards." Richard's jaw tightened. "The issue isn't your financial status, it's the deception." "I agree. You're right. There has been massive deception, but not from me. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am, a teacher who raised his daughter the best he could. Sarah is the one who created a fiction because she knew you'd never accept the reality." "Dad, stop," Sarah pleaded, but I was done being silent. "No, Sarah. You made me the villain in your story to win their approval. But what you never understood is that approval based on lies isn't worth having. These people," I gestured to the Hamiltons, "would never have accepted you for who you really are, the daughter of a schoolteacher raised in a 2-bedroom house who went to state college on scholarships and waited tables to pay for textbooks. You are ashamed of where you came from, but I'm not. I'm proud of the girl who worked hard, who earned everything she got, who didn't need to come from money to make something of herself." "How dare you lecture us about acceptance?" Margaret began, but Sarah interrupted her. "He's right. I've been lying to you since we met. My father isn't an alcoholic or a gambler. He's never been neglectful or absent. He's the man in those videos, the one at every event, the one who sacrificed everything for me. I created a different story because I thought it would make me more palatable to you." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked devastated. The Hamiltons looked scandalized. And Sarah looked free. For the first time in years, she looked like the daughter I remembered.
"I think," Richard Hamilton said slowly, his judicial bearing fully engaged, "we need to consider the implications of this revelation." "The implications?" I laughed, surprising everyone, including myself. "Your son just married my daughter. The implications are that you now have a daughter-in-law who was raised by a schoolteacher, not a cautionary tale. The implications are that Sarah is still the same accomplished, intelligent woman Marcus fell in love with. She just comes from humbler beginnings than she led you to believe." "But the lies," Margaret started. "Are inexcusable," Sarah interrupted, stepping forward. "I'm not defending what I did, but I need you to understand why I did it." She took a deep breath, and I saw her gather the courage she'd had as a child, before the world taught her to be ashamed of where she came from. "The first time I had dinner with your family, Margaret, you asked about my parents. When I mentioned my father was a teacher, you said, 'How nice, teachers are so important,' but your tone suggested otherwise. Richard, you immediately asked if I'd gone to private school, and when I said no, you looked at Marcus like he'd brought home a stray cat.
Every conversation after that was about your country club, your vacation homes, your investment portfolios, things that were as foreign to me as speaking Mandarin. Marcus finally spoke up. So, you decided to lie instead of telling me my parents were being judgmental? Sarah turned to her new husband, tears flowing freely now. You never saw it, Marcus. You never saw the way they looked at my engagement ring, the one you picked out yourself, and Margaret suggested you could upgrade it later. You never heard the comments about my retail job when I was working at the museum. You never noticed how they always found reasons to exclude my father from family events. We never excluded anyone, Richard protested. You invited Sarah to your anniversary party, but said it was couples only when she asked about bringing me. You had a family gathering at your lake house, but told Sarah it was immediate family only, even though Linda's husband was invited. You made it clear in 1,000 small ways that I wasn't welcome in your world. Emma appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. Sorry to interrupt, but people are starting to ask questions. Should we make an announcement? Yes, Sarah said suddenly, with a decisiveness that reminded me of the little girl who'd once announced she was going to be president. She walked past all of us, back into the reception hall, her wedding dress sweeping behind her. We followed, a strange processional of confusion and revelation. Sarah went straight to the microphone at the head table, tapping it to get everyone's attention. I have something to say, she announced, and the room fell silent. Many of you just watched a video that probably confused you. You saw images of a devoted father who was always there, always present, always loving. That man is my dad, Tim, standing in the back there. Every head turned to look at me. I wanted to disappear, but Emma's hand on my back kept me in place. For the past 5 years, I've told a different story about my father. I've painted him as absent, problematic, less than. I did this because I was ashamed. Not of him, but of myself. Ashamed that I came from a modest background, that we didn't have money, that my father was just a teacher. I thought if I created a more tragic narrative, it would explain why I didn't fit into the world I was trying to enter. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Linda had reappeared and looked mortified. The Hamiltons stood frozen by the balcony doors. But the truth is, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger, my father is the best man I know. He raised me alone after my mother left, working multiple jobs to give me every opportunity. He taught me about integrity, hard work, and unconditional love. Everything good in me came from him, and instead of being proud of that, I tried to hide it, to rewrite it, to make it more palatable for people whose approval I thought I needed. She looked directly at Marcus then. I lied to you, to your family, to everyone here. I'm not the person I pretended to be. I'm the daughter of a high school history teacher who did his absolute best. I went to public school, state college, and worked minimum wage jobs to pay my bills. I've never been skiing in Aspen or sailing in the Hamptons. The farthest I'd traveled before meeting you was a camping trip to the Grand Canyon that my dad saved for 2 years to afford. Marcus stood up slowly, walking toward his bride. The room held its breath. The woman I fell in love with was smart, kind, hardworking, and determined. Are you telling me those qualities are different now that I know where they came from? Sarah shook her head, unable to speak through her tears. Marcus turned to address his parents. Mom, Dad, you've always taught me that character matters more than circumstances, that integrity is worth more than inheritance. Sarah may have lied about her past, but she didn't lie about who she is. And if we can't accept her father, a man who clearly devoted his life to raising an incredible daughter, then what does that say about us? The room remained silent, waiting. Richard Hamilton looked at his wife, then at me, then at his son and new daughter-in-law. For a moment, the federal judge, who was used to making decisions that affected lives, stood uncertain in his own son's wedding reception. Finally, Margaret Hamilton did something unexpected. She walked across the room to where I stood, every eye following her movement. She stopped in front of me, this woman who dismissed me from the moment we met, and extended her hand. "It seems," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "we need to start over. I'm Margaret Hamilton, Marcus's mother, and you're Tim, the man who raised the woman my son loves. Would you join us at the family table? We have a lot to discuss." The room seemed to exhale collectively. Emma squeezed my shoulder. "Go," she whispered. "This is your moment, too." As I walked toward the front of the room, toward my daughter who was crying and smiling simultaneously, toward a son-in-law who was choosing love over prejudice, toward in-laws who were being forced to confront their own biases, I thought about all the moments that had led here. Every sacrifice, every late night, every time I'd chosen Sarah's needs over my own wants. Sarah met me halfway, falling into my arms like she had when she was little and the world was too big and scary. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "I know, sweetheart," I whispered back, holding my daughter on her wedding day the way I'd always dreamed I would, with pride, with love, and finally, with truth. The band started playing again, something soft and healing. Marcus joined our embrace, and then, surprisingly, so did Margaret and Richard. It wasn't a perfect moment. There was too much pain and deception for that. But it was a real moment, honest and raw and full of possibility. Later, as the reception continued with a different energy, one of authenticity rather than pretense, David, the friend who'd made the video, found me. "I'm sorry if I caused problems. I just wanted to show Sarah's whole story." "You did exactly that," I told him, watching Sarah and Marcus dancing, her head on his shoulder, both of them looking exhausted but somehow more solid. The wedding that had started with lies ended with truth. It wasn't the fairy tale the Hamiltons had planned, or the sophisticated event that Sarah had tried to orchestrate. It was messier, more complicated, more human. But it was real. As I finally took my place at the family table, no longer hidden in the back, no longer erased from my daughter's story, I realized something important. Sarah hadn't just been lying to the Hamiltons, she'd been lying to herself, convinced that where she came from made her less than. But tonight, in front of everyone, she'd finally understood what I'd tried to teach her all those years. Your worth isn't determined by your circumstances, but by your character. And character, real character, can't be bought, inherited, or faked. It can only be built, one choice at a time, one truth at a time, one moment of courage at a time.
The wedding video, meant to showcase a perfect union, had instead revealed an imperfect truth. And in that imperfection, in that messy, painful honesty, Sarah found something more valuable than the Hamiltons' approval. She found her way back to herself and back to the father who'd never stopped loving her, even when she'd tried to write him out of her story.